And these men began to just listen, care, love me in that place of just being so despairing and maybe even depressed at the time. They began to open up about stuff in their life, and they saved my heart. Hey everyone, I want to share a story of something that happened to me many years ago. I was pastoring a church that I had started. I planted it and had pastored it for 20 years. And it was a growing church. It was a church that was into the thousands in growth. I thought everything was just going great. We had another campus that we had planted that was also doing super well. We were looking at maybe doing a third campus. And I had just done a seminar up in a portion of the church, kind of in the upper part of this church. And I'd built three buildings, multi-million-dollar buildings, had a multi-million-dollar budget, had 40 staff on the team. Again, everything looked successful on the outside. And I just finished this spiritual warfare, which is ironic with what I'm going to share, spiritual warfare conference. And I came down, went down the steps, and there was an elder of our church with this grim, sort of grim reaper looking face. And he said, "Hey, come with me, Steve." And he said it in such a abrupt way. I was like shocked because I came down smiling. I was excited, joyful. Just finished a 3-hour seminar, and then this, And then I said, what's up, man? And he said, something's happened, something we need to talk to you about. And when I heard that, I thought maybe Liz, my wife, had been in a car accident, or one of our kids had been in a car accident, or something related to death might have happened. And so I was super concerned. I walk in to my office. So everybody's in my office there at the church, and they began to open up to me that I'm being put on a forced 6-month sabbatical because of my leadership style and various sundry items that were mentioned. And I'm like shocked. I'm like, what are you talking about? I just couldn't conceive of this level of pressure and even this level of discipline for what had nothing to do with sex. It had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with heresy. And those are kind of my three biggies I've always felt like are in the categories of areas where you come in and have to bring major discipline or even have a pastor step down. Heresy, sexual infidelity, embezzlement of finances, those kind of things. But leadership style? So I was pretty shocked. When I got home and I shared with Liz what these men had shared with me, she was incensed. And one thing I can tell you about my wife Liz, who's raised 7 kids, and now we have 7 grandchildren, she doesn't take a lot of BS. And so she was not happy. And she was not in agreement with the things that they had said. But it centered around my being a poor leader in relation to collaboration with others. I remember one of the points was he's an ADD leader, attention deficit deprived leader, And I agree with that. And I agree that I have sometimes can be an ADD leader. And under the circumstances that we had been under over about a year and a half was the launching of this other campus. And it had been difficult. We had gone through 2 other pastors for that campus. And it related a lot around the idea of doing a video campus or doing a live speaker campus. And back in those days, the satellite campus model was fairly new. There were probably about 25 or 30 noteworthy multiple campus churches in the United States. There were more than that, but I'm talking about those that, are sort of on the radar. And I would say out of that, there's probably only like 2 or 3 that were very successful at it. Because of that, we're just kind of learning and growing, and we actually have a consultant helping us. And I'm almost weekly on the phone with the consultant, and we were convinced that doing a recording me and then systematically transferring that and transporting that to the other campus was the best model, and the results were very positive. So things were going well. But within that campus, there were issues. Within our team, there were issues mainly related to the really being stretched out as far as our resources in relation to the campus. So it was a fixable situation. It was one that needed to be fixed. We had already been in discussion about it. Well, that's not my point. My point is that I felt a real deep sense of betrayal by my elders, and then the way in which they had worked behind the scenes with some of the pastors. Now, it was conveyed to me that every pastor was in agreement that, of these issues, and then I would later find out that others had not been consulted. So there was just one thing after another that created doubt in my heart as to the veracity of what was being shared. I share that because for you as a listener to understand the deep sense of betrayal that I felt at the time, and I felt so lonely, I felt so kind of ripped off. I had started the church in our home with nobody 20 years before and grown it into a multi-thousand member church and a multi-million-dollar budget with buildings and a really good staff team. If you looked at the record of the 20 years, very few people had been laid off. We had a pretty cohesive team. But there was no doubt that over that year, because of some of the issues I just mentioned, it had been difficult. But I felt sort of kicked out just in one day. I was not allowed to ever go back to the campus, at least during the 6-month sabbatical. I soon began to realize that the 6-month sabbatical was just kind of a setup for other things. And I realized that there was another plan involved in all of this. And so anyway, I became frustrated. I became angry for about a week or two. This anger kind of boiled up in me. If you've seen Forrest Gump, you may remember the part in the movie where Forrest Gump has been reunited with Jenny, his love since childhood. And then he wakes up the next day and finds out that she's left and abandoned him and kind of betrayed him, left him. And he doesn't know what to do. In the next scene, you see him sitting on the porch in his Nike shoes with his Bubba Shrimp hat on. I think it's a red hat. And he just gets up. And the way the narration goes, it's something like this. I just got up, and for no particular reason, I just began to run. And I ran in my driveway, and I just kept on going. And I ran to the county line. I just kept on going. And I ran through the state of Alabama. I just kept on going until I just had no more place to go. And then it shows him on, I think it's the Santa Monica Pier. And he's in California now, from Alabama to California. He turns around. He said, I just turned around and ran back. And then it shows him in Maine. And he just ran and ran and ran and ran. And so one day, I got up in the morning and I just began to walk. And I put on some hiking shoes and just began to walk and walk and walk. And for the next 5 years, almost every day, I walked. I walked sometimes a mile. Most of the time, 5 or 10 miles. I walked and I prayed and I sought God. I asked God for wisdom. What in the world is going on in my life? And one day, about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, into my walking, I came home and there was a guy at my fire pit in the back of my home. He was just sitting there and we started to talk and he asked how I was doing, and I began to share my heart and began to weep, and he began to weep. And then the next day there were 2 guys. And then a few days later there were 3 guys. And then over the next few weeks, there began to be more and more men that kind of timed it where they'd be at my fire pit when I came back from these long walks that I would do. And these men began to to just listen, care, love me in that place of just being so despairing and maybe even depressed at the time. They began to open up about stuff in their life, and they saved my heart. So if I were to describe it today, I would say that Jesus saved my soul, but this group of men around my fire pit saved my heart. And we began to coin a term, bloodstained allies. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in these sessions. Is what is it to have some men, some women for women, men for men? I think it should be, in most cases, same gender. Individuals in your life who care about you and love you and become a community of people. You don't need a lot. But a community of men and women that really have your back. And that's what these men did in my life. And all of them are still in my life. Most of them still are part of the church. Some have moved away, but of that original, probably a dozen guys, almost all of them are still at the church here that I pastor, the new church that I established after these events called The Road. That relationship has kept Liz and I strong. It really kept me sane during a deep sense of betrayal, a deep sense of hurt and pain. I think it's important to realize that the points that these men, these elders brought to me were all true. I mean, I don't think anything was made up. I think everything was true about me. It's the process that was so painful and so hurtful. It wasn't the what, it was the how. But here's the beauty of it, is that I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. I wouldn't even have ever even known the term bloodstained allies since God gave me that term. I'd never thought of that before. I didn't have any close male friends in my life at the level I do today. Dozens and dozens of men in my life today here at the Road, as well as our Tuesday morning breakfast with wholehearted men that we do. I mean, just so many beautiful, wonderful, powerful, caring, loving men in my life. I wouldn't have that if I hadn't gone through the deep pain and hurt that I went through a decade ago. And so I don't know about you. I don't know if you have that in your life, but I hope that you'll stick with these episodes coming up on bloodstained allies, because I think it might be one of the most important areas of growth in your life. If you can begin to develop, and I'm going to show you how, I'm going to show you what to look for in a bloodstained ally, but if you can begin to grow in having, nurturing, and maintaining some bloodstained allies in your life, men with some other men, women with some other women, that God's going to just empower you so much more, exponentially more than you could alone. And in my next episode, I'm going to talk about why I think that's important, and also look at men and women in the Bible who had bloodstained allies. So stick with me, hang with me. I think this could be a life-changing message for you.